Welcome to Dead Man Talking. Tonight's story is the next installment in the incredible series by Jack LaFontaine. As ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag Team Fear and DMT's Cryptid Crew. And so, with that aside, let's get into tonight's story, entitled Death Rides the Red. Let's get straight into that. Jason couldn't shake the feeling. It had been eating away at him for the last half hour. He had to turn back to town. Sam Bryan was a flawless judge of character. He could spot troublemakers by the way they carried themselves, or the look in their eyes. Sam had been sure of Nate Carson. Could Sam have been fatally wrong this time? Jason could not convince himself of it. It did not ring true. Something was not right, and Jason was sure the truth was not hiding on the lazy L. He could almost hear Sam's voice whispering it in his ear. An hour later, he was back in town. A crowd milled about the sheriff's office. Hotchkiss' coach was still outside and Jason could make out the driver, standing alongside the rig. And Hotchkiss was inside holding court in Sam's office. Jason suppressed a burst of rage. He needed a clear head. "I'm learning, Sam," he whispered and started a wide circle around Texoma. Jason pulled up in front of the Bryan house and swung down from the saddle. His gun was in his hand before he thought, and it felt right. He rapped lightly on the front door and called Ellie's name. When she didn't answer, the third time, he let himself in. Gun drawn, Jason searched the house. He found Ellie Bryan in her bedroom. Ellie's wide, terrified eyes stared up at him from the bed. She was tied to the bed with lengths of drapery cord. A dark circle of dried blood covered her dress from neck to waist. Jason holstered his Colt and pulled the gag from Ellie's mouth. "Oh, thank God, Jason, you're here. Oh, we've got to hurry. He's coming back." Jason cut the bonds from her wrists and took quick stock of her wounds. The cut to her neck was shallow, but had bled freely before stopping on its own. The cords had burned Ellie's wrists without blistering. They would heal. "Who did this?" "No time," she answered. "Follow me." Ellie led him out the front door and across the street to the Mosby's house. The house was one of the oldest structures in Texoma, built in the 50s. It was 2 stories of river rock and rough-cut cedar that always reminded Jason of a fortress. In those early years, it was a fortress. The Mosby house had withstood attacks by both Comanche and Kiowa raiders. Ellie dashed along the flagstone path, through manicured grass and bright flowers, to the front door of Eli and Sarah Mosby. She didn't bother to knock. Ellie dragged Jason through the door by his collar, turned and threw the huge bolt behind them. "Ellie, get your gun," Ellie told the startled owner. "Well, get going, old man," Sarah Mosby scolded. "Ellie, what's the matter, dear? Oh my God, you're bleeding." "It stopped. I'm okay now," Ellie explained. "Jason, go through there and lock the back door." Jason did as he was told and returned to the Mosby's living room, still wondering what was going on. Eli Mosby came down the stairs carrying an enormous Kentucky rifle. The weapon dwarfed its owner. "Is that thing safe?" Jason asked. "I can put a hole in your head at 100 yards with it. Would that do you?" Mosby said. "That'll do fine," Jason said. "Now, Ellie, Miss Bryan, tell me, what in God's name is going on around here?" Ellie Bryan managed to get everyone seated. She pushed the hair back from her face and, with a deep sigh, began to tell them about the hours since Sam's death. "Jason, I have a message for you from Sam. Don't interrupt. I'll explain." When y'all brought Sam home this morning, I just knew he was dead, but when I leaned close to him, he whispered to me. Jason, Sam told me Nate Carson didn't do the shooting. John Hotchkiss did. Or more likely, his men. Either way, Hotchkiss killed Sam. He said to tell only you, but somehow that man, Hargis, he heard him. He came back after y'all took Sam away. He was gonna kill me, and he will if he gets the chance. I think the only reason he hesitated was he was waiting for the posse to ride out so he could, well. Jason nodded. He said nothing, but he knew the word Ellie couldn't speak. Sarah, Ellie, I'm sorry. I probably put y'all in danger by coming here. I just didn't know what else to do. Jason, we need your help. Sam's counting on you. Yes, ma'am. I believe I know what to do. Mr. Mosby, can you hold down the fort here? Doc Ives and a couple of the men are over at Wentworth's. I'll send them to help. But in the meantime, don't let anyone in here. You can count on it, Sonny, Mosby said. Eamon Hargis left the Bryan house by the back door. Ellie Bryan was silenced. For now. Of course, he could have killed her. Probably should have killed her. He almost gave in to the temptation. The thought of hearing her neck snap was almost irresistible. But it would have to be a fleeting pleasure. Afterwards, he would have to dispose of the body, and that meant waiting for the posse to leave town. And since he must wait, why not have a little fun? He was still a man, and there would be time later to indulge in all of his appetites. A vision of rape by the moonlight flashed across Eamon's mind and sent a shiver of excitement through him. He let the vision grow, willed it on. He saw the look in the Bryan woman's eyes as she rose from the bed, the revulsion, the shame. Oh yes, the helpless, powerful submission. How sweet it would be, yet that look would not last long. When the change came, it would turn to horror. He never got enough of the utter terror the sight of his new body always delivered. And tonight he would mix that horror with her realization that the creature standing over her had also just raped her. Eamon would savor that look and drink it in slowly, right up until the moment he ripped her throat out. Life. Life was good. First, he had to tell Hotchkiss. He'd leave out the details. He always did. Still, he and Hotchkiss had an understanding. No unsanctioned killing of people. He was sure that once Hotchkiss knew the truth, he would approve his disposal of the Bryan woman. Hotchkiss had said as much, but with men like John Hotchkiss, it was always best to get it straight out. He found his employer sitting behind the sheriff's desk. Prospective posse members filled the room, hanging on his every word and hoping to be sworn in to do some killing. Before we take any action, Hotchkiss said, we need to go on and elect a new sheriff. We are going to do this legally. Gentlemen, the eyes of our state and our nation are upon us. Hotchkiss stopped speaking when Hargis entered the room and motioned for the congressman to meet him outside. If you will excuse me, I must speak with my chief of security. While I'm gone, y'all give some thought to who the next sheriff should be. Hotchkiss rounded the desk and the crowd parted to let him pass. Hotchkiss followed Hargis out of the door and out of earshot. Bring me up to date, Mr. Hargis. Eamon Hargis liked the way Hotchkiss called him, Mr., all the time. No one had ever called him that before, at least not in a civil tone of voice. Bryan's dead. That other deputy Conroe went to watch Carson's ford across the river. We do have one small problem. You know how I hate problems, Mr. Hargis. What is it? The sheriff's wife. He whispered to her before he died. I'm sure no one else heard. What do you want done? Could you hear what she said? And Hargis nodded. He told her you did it and She should tell only Conroe. And Conroe is the one sitting up on the river? Hargus nodded again. Excellent. She hasn't told him yet. Dispose of her. Discreetly, Mr. Hargus. Discreetly. Consider it done. Oh, and by the way, get over to the telegraph office and send a wire to Wacko and tell them to get those rangers up here as soon as possible. Jason Conroe felt alive again. He had purpose once more and meant to make the most of it. He left the Mosby house and slipped along Texoma's side streets to avoid the crowd at the sheriff's office. Hotchkiss was still running up his posse. He needed men he could count on to kill the men at the Lazy L without too many questions. A dead Nate Carson would be easy to blame for the death of the sheriff and the Pinkerton man. The rest he could lay at the feet of the clan. And Jason moved along parallel Main Street for 2 blocks and knocked on the back door of his old friend, Roscoe Shea. Roscoe ran the local telegraph office and stage line, and Jason heard footfalls approaching the door. I'm coming, Shea called. Roscoe, it's Jason. Let me in. Jason? What are you doing here? Shouldn't you be helping track down the sheriff's killer? I'm doing just that, Roscoe. Tell me, has Hotchkiss or any of his men been here since the shooting? No. Good. They will be, and here's what I want you to do. Now Jason laid out his plan and left Shea's by the back door. Roscoe dimmed the lights, returned to his room and waited for his next customer to arrive. He didn't have to wait long. A tall man with black hair, hard eyes, and a scar on his cheek stalked through Shea's door. Roscoe feigned business in the back room and took his time answering. Hey back there, the man growled. Get yourself in here. Congressman Hotchkiss wants a message sent. Roscoe opened the door to the front office slightly and peered sleepily out at the stranger. Eamon Hargus' impatience was evident in the thin press of his lips and the tightly bunched muscles of his jaws, and Shea stepped to his desk, still shuffling the papers in his hands. Congressman Hotchkiss wants this message sent now. Sure. Here, let's see it, Shea said. He read the message and sat at his telegraph. Roscoe tapped out the message to the Ranger headquarters in Waco. The message sent, Shea held the receiver close to his ear and nodded as he wrote out the acknowledgement. He handed the message to Hargus, and the tall man stuffed the note into his pocket. 10 cents, Shea smiled. Hargus flipped the coin into Shea's desk and strode on out. You're welcome, Shea called out after him. Shea smiled and reached under the desk to reattach the key. Then he tapped out the 2 messages Jason and he had worked out. And Shea also contacted Olin Powell and told him to have everyone ready to ride at a moment's notice. The dark took forever to arrive, or so it seemed to Hargus. He hated to wait, but he wanted a little moonlight for his romantic encounter. It made for better eye contact. Eye contact was so very important to lovers. He would extract the price of his weight from Ellie Bryan before she died. Why not extract a down payment now? The thought leaped unbidden to his mind. There was time. Maybe a little taste was what he needed to make the wait more tolerable. Eamon stepped off the walk in front of the telegraph office and started for the Bryan house. His chores were done. Hotchkiss wouldn't need him until later tonight. Yes, there was time for a little taste, and Eamon licked his lips. Earlier, the Bryan's door moved smoothly enough for Hargus to take Ellie Bryan by surprise. Surprise? Oh, that was no longer necessary. Hargus wanted her to know he was back. He lifted the door, forcing it to grind against its hinges, and Hargus took his time moving through the house. He let every footfall register his progress. It was all for naught. Hargus entered Ellie's bedroom to find she was gone. Rage boiled up from the core of Eamon Hargis and shook him in its grip. His long arms and legs reverberated with anger and hate. He brought down his fist into the middle of the bed. Support slats splintered and the side rails snapped under the force of the blow. The bed collapsed in upon itself, and fury surged over Hargis in fresh waves. It washed away his natural caution and unleashed an unquenchable flood of destruction that swept the Bryan house, and Hargis tore the front door from its moorings and threw it into the street. She was not going to get away. He could still smell her fear. He would find her, and there would be no more waiting. Death incarnate stalked Ellie Bryan, and his senses were keen. Hargis, flushed with anger, stormed across the narrow street. The trail led straight to the rock and cedar home of Eli and Sarah Mosby. At first glance, the place reminded Hargis of a small fort. No matter, there was not a fortress built that would save her now. Hargis kicked the Mosby's picket gate into splinters and uprooted the whitewashed archway. He would shove their dainty little arch right through the front door. Hargis lifted the twin posts above his head. Lightning flashed in front of his eyes and thunder rumbled from the doorway towards Hargis. Eamon Hargis was lifted from his feet, still holding the broken arch, and fell to the flagstone walk with a hollow thud. The air, not ripped from his chest with the initial blow, was driven out by the impact with the stone. Hargis gasped for air and tried to blink back the searing pain in his chest. The hand he sent to explore the blow came away bright red, and Hargis raised his head and saw frothy, pink bubbles boiling from the hole in his lung. In the doorway above him, smoke rose from the barrel of an impossibly long rifle held by a white-haired old man. And Hargis's head fell back to the ground, and he was still. Jason Conroe and Doc Ives heard the rolling thunder and knew it was the Mosby's antique come to life. They broke into a run, and Jason entertained hopes that Don and Red would finish with the graves and get the Mosbys before there was trouble. It was not to be. Jason jumped from his horse and sprinted across the Mosby's ruined yard. He sidestepped a red pool on the walkway and pounded on the door. "It's Jason. Let me in." The door began to open before he got the words out, and Eli Mosby appeared in the doorway, flanked by Ellie and Sarah, and Mosby wore a huge grin. "I got the rotten bast." Mosby's grin disappeared, replaced by stunned disbelief. "What happened?" Jason asked. "The man who attacked Ellie. Well, he was here. I shot him, dang near point blank. Where'd he go?" Mosby stepped past Jason to examine the blood pooled on the walk. "See? There's the crazy fool's blood right there." "Maybe you didn't hit him square," Jason offered. "Yeah, maybe a little red hen is about to fly out of my butt too." "Ellie, come on. I'm getting you out of here, now." Jason took Ellie by the hand and hustled her down the walk to the waiting horses. He helped her up onto Doc's horse and pointed it north. "Go," he commanded, "and don't stop for anything. I'll catch up." Ellie kicked the Doc's horse and was gone at a run. Jason swung up into his saddle. "Doc, stay here and lock this place down tight. I've got to get Ellie to someplace safe. You tell everyone the clan got her." "Where you going, boy?" Doc asked. "Better you don't know," Jason said, and was off after Ellie Bryan. The men from the sheriff's office were slower to respond to the gunshot. Hotchkiss added to the delay, just in case Hargis needed some time. Hargis was folding himself through the second-floor bedroom window when a crowd from the sheriff's office arrived at the Mosbys. He couldn't afford to be caught up there, and he dropped to the ground and worked his way between houses to the sheriff's office to wait for Hotchkiss to return. "Let me do the talking," Doc cautioned as he went to meet the crowd. the men of Texoma crowded into the Mosby's yard, trampling Sarah's flowers and spitting tobacco on her walk. And Sarah ignored their behaviour and let Doc do the talking. "What was all the shooting all about?" Hotchkiss asked. "Goddamn clan. They came in here after Mrs. Bryan. Eli here got a shut off and winged one of them, but his buddies carried her off with him." "Which way did it go?" Bill Simpson asked. "The wounded man went east through the houses," Doc pointed. "The riders, they went west." "Spread out, men," Hotchkiss ordered. "Find that wounded man. I know where the rest of them went." "Mr. Hotchkiss, how about me and some of the boys search house to house? There's no telling who may be in on all of this," Bill said. "You do that, Bill. I ain't going back to that is, the sheriff's office. Keep me informed." "Sure thing, Mr. Hotchkiss." Bill Simpson led the posse out with a smile. When they were gone, one of the Hotchkiss' security men pointed to a trail of blood that circled the Mosby house. "Mr. Hotchkiss, take a look." And Hotchkiss nodded. "Let's go," was all he said. John Hotchkiss and his security men walked back to the sheriff's. Hotchkiss stationed the men outside and went in by himself. "What the hell happened, Mr. Hargis?" Him and Hargis stepped from the cells into the office. Hotchkiss's "Mr." no longer carried the sound of success. It sounded more like an indictment. "That old geezer shot me." "I know that. Where's Ellie Bryan? Please tell me she's dead."
She's as good as dead."
"That's not good enough," Hotchkiss roared. "Go, find her, and do your job, Mr. Hargis. Protect me, and for God's sake, take care of the mess you made down the street. Do we understand each other, Mr. Hargis?"
"Yes, sir."
"Good. It'll be dark in a couple of hours. Clean up this tonight, and quietly. We'll get that posse out to the Lazy L later, but I want our men out there now."
"Consider it done."
"I do, Mr. Hargis. Don't fail me." After Hargis departed, the congressman called for his driver. "Mr. Humphreys," he said, "I'm worried about Hargis. He's allowed too many uncertainties creeping into my plans. I'd like you to take care of that deputy for me. See that he disappears forever."
"Yes, sir, Mr. Hotchkiss. That'd be my pleasure."
Jason caught up to Ellie atop a hill a quarter of a mile beyond the edge of town. They reined in to walk down the far side and let Texoma drop out of sight behind them. Ellie's breathing was every bit as fast and as hard as a winded mount.
"Jason, what's going on around here?"
she said between gulps of air.
"Where are we going?"
Jason halted, not having Sam Bryan to lean on. He had always felt free to charge right into whatever problem they faced, knowing Sam was there to back him up. Now Sam was gone, and for good. It was all up to Jason. His dream of one day wearing the sheriff's badge had turned into a nightmare. He got Ellie out of town in immediate danger, but now what? Sam had not left him completely in the dark. Sam believed Nate Carson held the answer to what was happening in Texoma. He would go see Carson and get the truth. Ellie was the problem. There was going to be shooting at the Lazy L soon, and Jason couldn't take the chance of a stray bullet finding its way to the only witness against John Hotchkiss. He had to get Ellie someplace safe. And when it got big, Mineral Creek, Jason had an idea how to do just that. "Follow me," he said. Jason and Ellie walked the horses up the middle of the creek for about a mile before Jason led them across country and doubled back to Colbert's ferry. Jason paid the fare and they took the ferry across into Indian territory before turning west. Wide bands of gold and crimson colored the horizon when Jason turned off the road onto a narrow trail that plunged into the woods. And still, a mile from their destination, Jason caught Ellie's reins and led her through the deepening twilight. Ellie was certain they were helplessly lost. Branches reached out of the dark to pull at her sleeves and brushed against her legs. The woods seemed to swallow them. Occasionally, Ellie managed a fleeting glimpse of the first stars above the treetops, but there were no landmarks that she could see. She was operating by faith now. Blind faith. Faith that her dead husband had left her in capable hands. Her faith began to waver. Her faith had all but failed when the trees opened up into a clear night sky and the flicker of a firelight ahead. The house that stood in the midst of the clearing had nothing of the Mosby house about it. It was little more than a windowless oak box of logs daubed together with red clay. A plume of light grey smoke rose from the chimney, and somewhere within a baby was crying. In front of the house, 4 dark-skinned men with guns sat around an open fire.
Jason?
Ellie asked.
It's okay. I know them, he said.
Jason raised a hand in greeting and was answered in kind. A tall man with a rounded belly and bowed legs rose to his feet and walked towards them. "Hello, white man," the stranger called out. The welcome was meant to sound gruff, but Ellie could see the big man smile, even in the dark. "Have you come to steal more land?" the man asked.
"Every last bit,"
Jason countered.
"An honest white man.
'Tis a good sign," the man told his companions. "Get down, honest white man, and share our fire." "Thank you, Don," Jason said as he climbed down from his saddle. And Jason helped Ellie and they joined the men seated around the fire. "Eleanor Bryan, I'd like you to meet an old friend, Donald Quaid." The big man nodded at Ellie, and she felt sure, had the light been better, he blushed. "Welcome," Quaid said.
"Thank you, Mr. Quaid. I was sure Jason was lost until I saw your fire."
"Of course he was lost. That is why we built such a big fire." "Why, you old scallywag, he did no such thing," Jason said. "The truth is, old Don here has forgotten the old ways. He builds a white man's fire nowadays. I am deeply offended, white man, but for the lady's sake I will excuse you. Mrs. Bryan, this is my father, Balaam, and these other men are my neighbors, John Burris and Jason Wolfe. Now, let us all sit and hear how we can help my friend." "Do I really look that pitiful?" Jason said, and 5 heads around the fire nodded in unison. "If that don't beat all, well, all right. Here it is. I need someone to protect Mrs. Bryan while I go after her husband's killer." And heads nodded again. Jonas Wolfe, the youngest of the 4 men, spoke to the others in Chickasaw. There followed a nodding of heads and rapid bursts of more Chickasaw. It was Don Quaid who finally spoke to the guests in English. "Does the one who killed her husband seek her too?" "He does," Jason said. More Chickasaw words and nodding before Wolfe spoke again, and a disagreement began to grow between Burris and Wolfe. The quarrel was ended by the elder Quaid, who motioned his son and Jason towards the horses. "We will protect Mrs. Bryan as best we can," Quaid said. "But you must not go after this killer tonight." "I have to, Don. Sam Bryan was my friend." That may be so, but you do not know how to catch this killer. It is not a man you seek." "What? You know who killed the sheriff?" "That's impossible. How could you know?" "We know many things the whites no longer know. We heard this killer's song. It sings the song of the wolf, but it is not a wolf. It wears the skin of a man, but is not a man. It cannot be killed with your gun or your knife." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about old ways. Ways older than red man and white man. I speak of a spirit that has walked since the crawfish pushed up the earth,
It is what my people call Ishtu Hollow. Ton, Sam Bryan was shot. There's no mystery creature, only a man with a gun.
Stay here with us, Jason Conroe. Jonas has strong medicine and we have hunters tracking the Ishtu Hollow.
Whether I hunt the killer or not, I can't stay. I gotta get to the Lazy L before morning or innocent men will die.
Then take this, Jonas Wolf said from behind Jason. The Chickasaw handed Jason a long slender knife and some petals from a white flower bound together by a thin leather cord. The knife was fashioned from bone and carved with intricate designs and inlaid with silver. The blade had a slight curve sharpened on both sides so that it reminded Jason of a large fang.
When you come to believe, Wolf said, do not shoot and do not run. Slide the blade here between the ribs into the creature's heart.
Now Jason Conroe left Ellie in the care of the Chickasaws and rode south towards the Red River. It was a short ride, but the darkness forced him to slowly pick his way along the narrow path. The going would be faster once he crossed onto the cleared land of the Lazy L. Jason had to get there ahead of the posse. He had hoped Shay and the others had been successful, delaying the posse's start from Texoma. The ground underfoot began to slope away and the wind carried the scent of the river. He was close. The soft banks could be treacherous and steep. He stepped out of the saddle and led the way to the river on foot. Jason stopped where the cottonwoods gave way to the shrubs and sand of the river bank. A light mist that rose from the river into the rapidly cooling night air, but the far bank was still visible. Moonlight reflected on the water and washed the sandy shores in its glow. Farther back from the river, the trees were rooted in thick darkness. He would present an easy target as he crossed. A target? For who? It's the middle of the night, for God's sake, he told himself. The knock on his door was so faint, Doc Ives wasn't sure he heard anything at all. He shuffled across the parlour and listened for the sound to come again. Is somebody there? He asked.
Help me, please. Oh God, it hurts,
the small voice replied. The doctor opened the door. The colour washed from his face, and he rocked unsteadily on legs that struggled to hold his weight.
I took a bullet in the chest today, Eamon Hargis said.
Hargis opened his shirt and tapped the small dimpled scar in the centre of his chest.
Oh, it seems to have healed already. Amazing, isn't it?
And Hargis threw a short jab into the middle of the doctor's face. Ives crashed to the parlour floor, and blood dripped from his crushed lips. His nose was broken, and his eyes began to swell, but not before he saw the blood spatter from his face to the parlour floor. And Hargis wedged the boot under the doctor and kicked him in his back.
Only fast healing is not nearly as amazing as this,
Hargis said. The tall man's lips drew back from his teeth in a fierce snarl. Hair sprouted over his face and bare chest, and Doc Ives' vision was obscured by blood and swelling, but not enough to prevent him from watching Hargis become something neither man nor beast, yet a little of both. Ives tried to scream, and Hargis cut him short. The wolf thing gently closed the doctor's door and loped across town to keep his next appointment. The next morning, the Mosby's maid found their front door standing open. It was the first and least chilling of all the discoveries she made that day. A trail of dried blood led the way up the stairs. Upon her bed lay the disemboweled body of Sarah Mosby. Blood radiated from her torn abdomen like spokes from a wheel. Eli's Kentucky rifle was jammed between the mattress and the headboard. Mosby's head was impaled on the long barrel. For years, folks around Texoma claimed to see Eli Mosby, but his body
it was never found.
Jason crouched between the trees and studied the banks of the river by moonlight. He shouldn't be worried, but he was. His gut was churning in waves of nausea. In his head, Sam's voice kept whispering for him to slow down. Sam was always trying to rein him in, and Jason hated it. He couldn't shake the warning eating at his middle, and opted to follow Sam's advice. And Jason squinted and stretched his neck towards the south bank, as if it would improve his vision. And hands closed over Jason's mouth and yanked him from his feet. And Jason looked up into the face of Jonas Wolf. A broad smile spread across Wolf's face, and he held a single finger to his nose. And slowly, Jonas removed his hand from Jason's mouth and pointed across the river. Jason saw faint movement among the trees on the far shore. The mist was much thicker now, but Jason could make out the dark form as it moved from tree to tree. And Jonas motioned Jason deeper into the cottonwoods. The Chickasaw pointed to Jason's horse and then back the way they had come. And Jason obeyed, and the pair moved away from the river. They rode only 100 yards before the wind shifted and blew from the north. The change in the wind brought with it a long, mournful howl from behind them, and then a second, closer this time. And Jonas lashed out at Jason's horse. "Run!" Wolf yelled. And Jason kicked his bay into a sprint, but the horse needed little urging. Jason and Jonas charged headlong through the trees, mindless of the overhanging branches and the roots that grew into the trail. They slowed only when Don Quaid's fire was once again in sight. "What in the hell was that thing?" Jason said. "That was the Ish-to-Hollow, white man." "You should have listened to me," Quaid replied. "How many times have you said those words?" Jonas asked. "Too many and never enough," Quaid laughed. Jason noticed Jonas' left eye was cut and swollen, but there was no bleeding. "Did a branch get you?" Jason pointed at the cut. "No, a Burris," Don said. "He wanted to let you go meet the Ish-to-Hollow on your own." Jonas disagreed. "Thanks," Jason said. "Now, tell me about this Ish-to-Hollow. How do we kill it?" "Doctor," Don said to Jonas, "will you explain to the white man?" The story the Chickasaw medicine man told Jason about the creature was punctuated by distant howls carried to them from the river. "He's hunting you," Jonas said with a nod of his head towards the cry of the wolf. "Me? Why?" "I don't know why, but I know he had your scent and lost it." "We didn't exactly try to hide our trail," Jason said. Jonas held a bundle of the white flowers out to Jason, and Jason smelled the flowers and shrugged. There seemed nothing unusual about them. "Wolfsbane," Jonas said. "The Ish-to-Hollow smell is keen. It doesn't like the scent of these flowers." And Jonas laid them across the trail for several yards. "That's why you weren't followed further," Quaid explained. And the Hotchkiss men sent to guard the Lazy L had no such protection, and they knew it. They huddled together among the trees and prayed to God, and John Hotchkiss, the thing, followed orders and stayed away from them. They weren't sure just what Hotchkiss had that howled like that, but they had seen what it could do, and that was enough. Whether by the will of God or decree of Hotchkiss, the creature remained unseen, and the guards untouched. The 4 men inside the Lazy L ate a hurried breakfast of biscuits and bacon. Even when not on watch, none of them had much success sleeping the night before. They followed the sound of the creature's track through Texoma. The haunting howls never seemed to get close to the Lazy L, but knowing it was on the prowl kept their eyes open. The rising sun told them just how tired they were. It was not the best way to start a pitched battle, but it would have to do. And Jimmy's biscuits were light as a feather on the tongue, but soon weighed like lead on the eyelids of the tired men. Nate, Jack, and Nick slipped slowly into sleep while still on their seats. Jimmy let them doze and took up a position to watch the road. While the Lazy L slept in the early dawn, John Hotchkiss finalized Bill Simpson's appointment as sheriff, and Simpson promptly picked out the 20 men Hotchkiss wanted for a posse and placed everyone under Hotchkiss's command. While Simpson was busy with his first official duties, Hotchkiss sent Humphreys to Shantytown. The driver was to arrange for volunteers to avenge the murdered work gang. 15 freedmen volunteered, were promptly armed by Humphreys and marched to the sheriff's office. Hotchkiss looked over the assembled men at his command. They had just the right look. A man who could assemble a posse of Confederate veterans and a bunch of armed Negroes could go places, Hotchkiss told himself. Places besides Texas. Places like Washington, maybe even Europe. Ambassador Hotchkiss had a pleasant ring to it, and so did John Hotchkiss, defender of the new Union, businessman, advisor of presidents, attendee at the court of St. James, and richest man in Texas. And hanging a few worthless rebels was all that stood in his way. Hotchkiss supplied every man on the posse with a gift of a horse taken from the Rockin' H stock. Mounted and well-armed, the posse headed for the Lazy L, and Simpson was instructed to follow on foot with the Negro volunteers. "Let's get these men out to the Lazy L before the Rangers get here," Hotchkiss told his second in command. "Move out," Hargis punctuated the shouted order with a sweeping wave of his arm. "Everything in town was satisfactorily taken care of, Mr. Hargis?" he asked. "Absolutely." We got riders coming on in," Jimmy announced. Nate, Jack, and Nick came instantly awake and took up their positions. Nate and Jack crouched beneath the front windows, and Nick moved to the cover at the back door. And Jimmy kept his place at the south windows. "How many, Jimmy?" Nate asked. "Couple dozen, Captain." "Speaks well of Sam Bryan," Nate observed. "Not too good for us, though." They're spreading out. Y'all should see 'em any time," Jimmy said. "I got 8, maybe 9 in the trees back here," Nick called out. "About a dozen, plus Harmon and Hotchkiss," Jack said. "I don't see a sheriff's badge anywhere. How about y'all?" Nate asked. "Nope. Looks like vigilante justice has come to call. Can't say I'm surprised," Nick answered. "Nate Carson!" The baritone voice of John Hotchkiss boomed. "Nate, we're here to take you in for the murder of Sheriff Bryan and John Teague. We have the place surrounded, and the Sheriff Simpson is on the way with more men and the Texas Rangers. Do yourself a favor and surrender now, before there's any shooting. You'll get a fair trial. You have my word on that. But you have to come out now, and you have to come out peaceable. You dally or start shooting and all bets are off." "You men out there with Hotchkiss," Nate hollered. "Y'all don't be foolish. The man's a dirty, lying weasel. His own pa was ashamed of him. It was his men that started the shooting and killed Sam. Do you really want to risk your necks trying to get in here for the likes of him? That's what y'all be doing, because you sure as hell ain't doing it for Sam Bryan." "Listen to me," Hotchkiss countered. "Those men in there are wanted by the law. I have the warrants right here. Nate Carson shot Sam Bryan because he was about to serve these warrants, and I heard him threaten to kill anyone trying to arrest his friends, that included the sheriff." "Try and keep him talking, Nate. I want to check something," Jack whispered. And before Nate could answer, Jack was gone. "Well, as long as they stay back in those trees, let 'em be," Nate said. "Where's Jack going?" "Down the hole," Jimmy answered. "He was up to something down there earlier this morning." Minutes later, Jack crawled out of the hole and returned to Nate's side. This time he stayed below the level of the windows and out of the posse's sight.
"They only have one man on the north side of the house,"
Jack announced.
"How do you know?"
Nate asked.
"There's no windows on that side." "There is now."
Jack smiled up at him.
"I made one this morning."
"You what?"
"I cut a hole in the north wall. Like you say, ain't any doors or windows over there, so I figure they might leave it unguarded. I was right. We have a way out, if we need it."
"You cut a hole in my house?" Nate was incredulous.
"Well, yeah, just in case."
"Okay, let me get this straight," Nate said. He pointed at Jack. "You cut a hole in the side of my house, just in case?" Then he pointed at Jimmy. "And you let him do it?"
"That's about the size of it."
Jack smiled again. Sorry, Captain," Jimmy said, unsure whether to laugh or show contrition.
"Have either of y'all thought about what you're gonna do if we survive this?"
"Got more coming, Captain," Jimmy called out. "Looks like Bill Simpson and a bunch of gun-toting Negroes."
"Hotchkiss is pulling out all the stops,"
Nick said. Outside, Bill Simpson busied himself stationing the freedmen in the gaps between the other members of the posse. Then he reported to Hotchkiss. "Any word from the Rangers?" Hotchkiss asked. "None," Simpson answered. "Ain't seen hide nor hair of a single one. What'll we do?" "Just sit tight. We'll try and keep them penned up here. If they start shooting, tell your boys to open up on them." The two sides spent the next few hours staring at each other, while John Hotchkiss's patience trickled away. Patience had never been his strong suit, and the Ranger's delay was excruciating. Unable to contain himself any longer, Hotchkiss summoned Eamon Hargis and ordered him back to town. Hargis growled at being used as an errand boy, but Hotchkiss was able to soothe his ire. "I'm saving your talents for tonight, my friend. You'll get your chance." But the horses in Remuda shied away from Hargis. He managed to get control of a bay with a rocking H brand and swung into the saddle. The nervous mare bolted and Hargis put the spurs to her. The horse refused to slow the entire way to town. Not that Hargis cared to slow down. By the time Hargis arrived at Shays, the poor animal was lathered and blowing great deep breaths. Hargis threw the reins into the street. The door to the telegraph office was locked, and Hargis kicked it open and went in. He made a quick search and decided the place was empty. Hargis sat at the key and tapped out a message to Ranger headquarters. The reply came back quickly. "As requested by Congressman Hotchkiss, Rangers on station. Whitesboro, waiting further orders." Hargis was livid. He sent 2 messages before ripping up the key and throwing it through the window. The first was to Waco, the second to the Rangers waiting in Whitesboro. Both read, "Direct Rangers to Lazy L. Texoma. Now, Hotchkiss." And Hargis stomped out of the telegraph office in search of a fresh horse. He found one tied outside the Lone Star, and was headed for the Lazy L before its owner knew it was gone. But the sun had hit its zenith when Hargis lit from the stolen spent horse and found his boss. "Where the hell are the Rangers?" Hotchkiss fumed.
"Whitesboro."
"What?"
"Seems someone sent a message in your name, directing them to wait in Whitesboro. They've been sitting down there on their asses since dawn. There had to be that pimple of a telegraph man. He's cleared out. Question is, who put him up to it?"
Hargis said. "Goddamn clan, that's who," Hotchkiss growled. "He must be one of them. Those scum would do anything they thought they could for a minute that would cause me trouble. Well, if they intend to meddle in this, let's be ready. Maybe we can put an end to their interference for good. Have Simpson move half those Negroes to watch the road and promise them $1 for every bloody white robe they bring me. You can take care of our telegraph man after this is over."
Sure thing, Congressman. Do you think Carson's in the clan?
If not, he's just joined up now. We have proof they're working together. This just gets better and better for us. I think it's time we get the festivities started. How about you? Jason and Jonas Wolf started east for the Colbert's Ferry at first light. The Chickasaws convinced Jason against taking on the werewolf by himself. Though they heard no gunfire, Jason thought Hotchkiss and his posse had to be at the Lazy L by now. At best, Roscoe had held them up until early morning. His message would delay the Rangers beyond noon. The town would be empty of all but those loyal to Jason and the clan. And there was much to do, if only Carson held out long enough. Carson, this is your last chance. Come out now or we're coming in after you, Hotchkiss bellowed. Lead the charge, Congressman. I got something for you, Nate replied. Have it your way, Carson. Hotchkiss turned and gave Hargus a quick nod. Hargus moved behind the cover of the trees to a group of men stationed there.
Cover me, boys,
he ordered, and started towards the unprotected barn at a run. When Hargus started in motion, those stationed in the trees beyond Nate's front door opened fire, and the remaining members of the posse positioned around the house followed their lead.
Hammond's making for the barn.
Jack switched rifles.
Get him!
Jack and Nate fired through the shattered windows, trying to pick off the sprinting Hargus. Nick and Jimmy returned the posse's cover fire. And Hargus crossed the open ground with an agility and speed Nate thought beyond a man of his size. He was out of their line of fire in seconds. Behind the house, the posse took advantage of all the firing and closed in. Nick and Jimmy opened up and drove them back in the cover of the trees, and slugs riddled the walls of the ranch house from all sides.
Nate, Jack said, you still mad about the little hole I made in your house?
Shut up, Jack, Nate said and ducked as a slug splintered the window casement above his head. Nate peeked over the sill and fired, and one of the posse clutched his chest and fell to the ground. Blood has been spilled, Nate told himself, and damned if he wasn't the first one to spill it. There will be no hope of negotiation now, not that there had ever been. Hargus rode out of the barn a moment later, sitting atop Nate's buckboard. Lil Joe was hitched to the buckboard and running like the devil was chasing him. In front of the ranch house door, Hargus hauled back on the reins. Lil Joe was big and strong, but the force of Hargus's arms brought the black horse skidding to a stop. Hargus drew his revolver and shot Little Joe. The big horse jerked once and collapsed in a boneless heap. Blood pooled under the horse's head.
No!
Nate yelled and leapt through the shattered window. Nate's first shot hit Hargus in the throat, knocking him to the ground behind the wagon and out of Nate's sight. Some would-be heroes in a posse stepped from behind the trees to get a better shot at Nate. Nate fired 4 times. 2 members of the posse fell dead, and 2 were left writhing in pain. Nate launched himself into the air. He intended to land in a buckboard and get another shot at Hargus, but the buckboard did not cooperate. It took on a life of its own and stood up on its side. Nate crashed headfirst into the bed and fell with a heavy thud. He hit the ground and rolled into the open, and Hargus soared over the buckboard and pounced on him. Nate tried to raise his Colt, but Hargus brushed it aside.
You can't hurt me with that,
Hargus growled. The creature behind Hargus's eyes burned with a dark rage. He plucked Nate's slug from his neck and rolled it in between his long fingers before casually flipping it aside. Nate's mind flashed back to Gettysburg in the moonlight. He saw the beast pull the bayonet from his chest as it came for him, and Hargus pulled Nate's face close to his. Nate could feel the rage radiating from his adversary. I'm gonna eat your heart, and I'm not waiting for nightfall to do it. A flash of movement caught Hargus's eye. He turned in time to see Jack Morgan raise his gun and take aim. Morgan would not be firing lead. His plans disrupted, Hargus dropped his prey and rolled,
Jack shot board into the bed of the upturned wagon. Hargus regained his feet using the toppled buckboard as cover, and he trotted back to the trees near Hotchkiss. "What the hell were you thinking?" Jack shouted at Nate. Jack grabbed his dazed friend by the collar and hauled him towards the house. They were now exposed to the posse on the south. Nick relieved Jimmy and laid down a covering fire with his carbine. Jimmy held the door open until Jack got Nate back inside, and then sent both barrels flying towards the posse, moving up behind the cover of the buckboard. Jack pushed Nate across the floor into position by the windows and plopped down beside him. You crazy?" Jack huffed. You can't go after him like that, even in the daylight. Do you think lying dead out there next to your horse is going to help anybody?" "I'm sorry," Nate mumbled in apology. Nate met Jack's eyes and the corners of his mouth curled upwards. "Damn, my head hurts." Jack and Nate exchanged growing smiles and then burst into laughter. Outside, the gunfire gradually slowed and then died away. Roscoe Shea joined Jason and Jonas at Colbert's Ferry not long after the shooting to the west began to die away. "I hope we're not too late," Roscoe said. "I don't think so, but we have to get everyone to Carson's by dark." "We'll make it. The rest of the boys should be here in an hour or two. You really think this is a good idea, Jason?" "No, but it's the only idea we have." That's comforting," Roscoe said. "Ain't it, though?" "They're tightening the noose," Nick said. The gunfire settled down to a sporadic trickle. The sun was working its way down the western sky as Hotchkiss's men arrived with wagons brought up from the Rocket H. They positioned these around the house and reinforced the wagons by piling Nate's cordwood against the upturned beds. "How long are we going to have to hold out?" Nate asked. "I figure at least till morning," Nick replied. "But we're talking about the army, so who can say for sure?" "I never thought I'd live to see the day that I would be glad to see bluecoats were coming," Nate said. "Yeah, kind of funny, ain't it?" "I hope they get here soon," Jimmy said, "'cause we got more riders coming on in." 10 Texas Rangers rode onto the Lazy L, and they were met by Bill Simpson, who directed them to Hotchkiss. The posse cheered the Rangers' arrival, but daylight and the chance to breach the Lazy L that day was slipping away. The men inside held their fire, even though the Rangers remained mounted in their open and within range. There was a very animated conversation going on between Hotchkiss and one of the Rangers, and finally the lawman dismounted and began to fan out around the house. The Ranger, who had been talking to Hotchkiss, moved up behind Nate's overturned buckboard and peered over the top. "Hello in the house," the Ranger shouted. "This is Captain Thomas of the Texas Rangers. I want y'all to listen real close. Nate Carson, you are under arrest for the murder of Sheriff Sam Bryan. Morgan and Corbin, y'all are under arrest for the attempted assassination of Congressman Hotchkiss and the murder of Henry and John Hotchkiss. The governor has authorized me to extend to y'all his personal promise of a fair trial in a Texas court. However, you must surrender peacefully, and you must surrender right now. If you refuse, we are authorized to bring y'all in dead or alive. It's up to you. What'll it be, boys?" And they turned to Jimmy. "I'm getting you out of here. They ain't after you." "Ain't no way I'm leaving. You said it, Captain Hotchkiss. Can't leave any of us alive. No, sir. I'm staying. I'd just as soon be shot here in a fair fight as wait and have one of Hotchkiss's men put a bullet in my back." "You think this is a fair fight?" Jack asked. "We could have used you in the Petersburg trenches." "Okay, Jimmy. Have it your way. I could never make you do anything you didn't want to do anyway," Nate said. "Well, Carson, what is it?" Captain Thomas broke in. "You want me to give the captain his answer, or should I?"
Jack asked Nate. Oh, I think I'll do it, if you don't mind. Not at all. Everybody ready then? Nate slowly opened the door and stepped out onto the porch, his hands raised. Captain Thomas, I'm Carson. Let's talk this over. Just me and you. You surrender and we can talk about anything you like, but there'll be no talk until then. I was afraid you'd say that. Well, here's your answer, Captain, Nate said. Nate's hand hit his revolver and leveled it at Thomas before the lawman could blink. Nate's single shot sent Thomas's hat sailing into the air. The Lazy L exploded with gunfire from every direction, and Nate dropped to his back and slid into the house. Why didn't you kill him when you had the chance? Jack asked. Well, that would have sent the wrong message, Nate said. Killing him would have proved Hotchkiss right. We're nothing but killers. My little stunt says we're armed resistance to injustice. We don't want to kill, but we will if we're forced to do it. Okay, I can see that, Jack said. But I'm not sure they will get it. Probably not. I didn't sink in during 4 years of the war. I still think it's worth saying. The shooting by both sides was largely ineffective. Each side held their protective positions without loss. The firing died away as the sky grew darker and targets were harder to see. Both sides began to settle in for the night. Jimmy, Nate said, how about getting us a fire going in here and throwing on some steaks, maybe some biscuits? Let's tell the posse we're warm and well fed. It's going to be chilly outside with no campfire. Sure thing, Cap. And the smoke was soon rising from the chimney of the Lazy L, and the late October breeze carried on it the smell of frying beef. Out in the open, the posse's fires made them well-lit targets for the fugitives. And after several were wounded, they gave up on their fires and began to shiver. Jack slipped beneath the floor and returned to his hole in the wall. He found a large number of men outside that had moved to the north side of the house. They had a large bonfire of barnwood blazing. Jack pushed the barrel of his Winchester through the hole and sprayed the men with a wild shower of lead. He winged a couple of men and the fire was abandoned, which was Jack's intent from the start. Hungry and cold, the posse began to melt away into the dark. Something's going on out there, Jack announced. They're bringing up horses. I wonder what's got them so dang excited all of a sudden. Gunfire erupted outside, but it didn't seem to be aimed at the men inside the house. Take a look, Nick offered and slid through Jack's hole in the floor. When outside, the Rangers mounted their horses and formed up in a line facing towards the north. The Rangers started forward at a walk. As they were about to pass from Nick's field of vision, they charged. Hey, they're riding out, Nate said. Dang if they ain't, Jack added. A moment later, Nick reappeared, and he darted into position next to Jack. A big grin lit his face. Nate, you old carpetbagger, he said. You have a cross burning in your north pasture? Say what? The clan is back. What are they doing here? Jack asked. Whatever their intention, they're drawing off the Rangers. They just sat there with their burning cross until the Rangers started after them. Then they led out towards the river, Nick said. I got a bunch of fellas moving over here, Jimmy called. Nick moved over near Jimmy for a better look. Looks like the Negroes are packing it in, Nick said. That doesn't leave Hotchkiss with many men. Oh, many witnesses, Jack added. He'll make a move soon. Reckon he'll try and send in his little pet? Nate asked. I count on it, Jack answered. Keep a sharp eye out. He'll move Simpson and what's left of the posse out the way. Hotchkiss will want them to see Hargis come this way. Steady, boys. Wait for them to commit, Jason Conroe told the hooded riders. The Texas Rangers formed in a line just outside the tree and started out at a slow walk. On a signal from Captain Thomas, they charged the Klansmen. Now, Jason ordered. The Klansmen whirled their horses and headed north. They led the Rangers towards the Red River before turning east to the Rockin' H. Remember, a merry chase is all we want. Don't let them fall too far behind, Jason cautioned. Once on the rocking H, the clan riders turned back south towards the Hotchkiss home place. When the ranch house was clearly in the ranger's sight, the clan shifted direction again. There were the makings of a new road leading from the house to the river that Jason wanted the rangers to see. The road led to the construction site down by the river that Jason wanted to show off as well. The chase was indeed a merry one, that is until midway to the river. A tall black figure leaped from behind an oak and onto the road in front of the clansman. Jason's horse spooked, cut sharp right, and then froze. Jason hugged the horse's neck and fought to stay in the saddle. Most of his fellows found themselves in a similar predicament. Two of them were picking themselves up off the road, and the creature that caused the stir was gone. What the hell was that? Someone asked. Danged if I know, Jason said. Thought it was a man at first, but the damn thing had a tail. That's one of those things from the other night. We better not sit here debating, Roscoe Shea added with a nod back down the trail at the coming rangers. Shea didn't see the set of yellow eyes watching him from the trees. Before he could move, the werewolf stepped back onto the road. Roscoe tried to draw his gun, and Jason's warning was lost in Shea's screams. The monster launched itself at Roscoe and carried him from the saddle, and Shea was dead when he hit the ground. Shots from the approaching rangers preempted any foolish rescue attempts, and the clansmen spurred their frightened horses away as Shea was dragged into the trees. Jason pushed the clan onwards towards the construction site near the river. As they approached the building, the clan came under fire. Jason widened the loop around the site to keep out of range, and the rangers were not so accommodating. Half of the rangers peeled off and headed straight for the shooters with guns drawn. Jason directed the chase away to the east of the growing gunfight. He wanted to get the rangers to Colbert's Ferry as close to dawn as possible. He thought the timing was going to be just about right. Wow. Absolutely awesome stuff there from Jack once again. Make sure you tune in tomorrow for the next and final installment in this incredible story. Of course, as ever, please do let me know what you thought down below in the comments box. Please do like and share. It really does help build the channel and our community further. And why not hashtag Team Fear and DMT's Cryptid Crew. If you're an aspiring writer or would just like to have a crack at things, want to get in touch with myself at the usual email as on screen, which is dmtforestoffear@gmail.com. I look forward to hearing from you. I hope everybody's doing well and keeping fit and focused as possible during these testing times. Looking forward to a loving and warm Christmas. And above all, remember, be safe, not sorry.